Start in 1995. Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao quietly orders preparations for a nuclear test in the remote sands of the Pokhran Desert. But his administration makes a critical error. They fail to hide their tracks from the sky. High above the atmosphere, American spy satellites catch the sudden influx of vehicles and equipment. The top-secret operation is exposed before a button is pushed. Almost immediately, the phone rings in New Delhi. U.S. President Bill Clinton applies massive geopolitical pressure, making it crystal clear that if India proceeds, they will face severe economic consequences. The test is abruptly cancelled. The failed attempt revealed a hard truth. For India to secure a nuclear deterrent, brilliant physicists wouldn't be enough. They had to figure out how to execute a massive industrial operation while under the constant, unblinking eye of the world's most advanced intelligence network. To understand why India risked everything, we must rewind to the early 1960s. In 1962, India suffered a heavy defeat in a sudden border war with China, losing vast territory. Soon after, Beijing detonated its own atomic bomb. The military pressure intensified significantly during the brutal 1971 war with Pakistan. Massive naval fleets from the US and the UK moved to surround the Indian coast. The situation was dire until the Soviet Union dispatched its own armed cruisers to intervene, forcing the Western fleets to back down. Around this time, the global superpowers drafted the Non-Proliferation Treaty, or NPT. This agreement essentially stated that the nations already possessing nuclear weapons would keep them, while actively preventing developing countries from acquiring the exact same defensive technology. India's early atomic ambitions then suffered a devastating setback. In January 1966, Dr. Homi Bhabha died in a plane crash. Weeks later, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died under suspicious circumstances. In less than 30 days, the scientific and political engine of the project vanished. Geographically surrounded by hostile forces, legally boxed in by Western treaties, and stripped of its visionary leaders, the nation's nuclear program was forced completely into the shadows. 8 years later, under the leadership of Indira Gandhi, India finally pulled off its first underground atomic test, codenamed Smiling Buddha. The scientists managed this despite severe financial and technological limitations. Resources were so scarce that they had to temporarily shut down the entire Pramima research reactor. They needed to scrape together every last ounce of its plutonium just to build a single 12-kiloton explosive device. The 1974 test completely blindsided the international community. The United States and Canada were entirely unaware that India had the capability to successfully refine the materials and engineer the blast right under their noses. The retaliation was swift. Western nations formed the Nuclear Suppliers Group, an export control cartel designed to enforce strict embargoes. They cut India off from the global supply chain, intending to permanently cripple any future weapons development. Let's jump to 1998. Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee and lead scientist APJ Abdul Kalam resurrect the program. To ensure the disastrous leaks of 1995 never happen again, they hand operational security over to the Indian Army's 58th Engineer Regiment. Their challenge is immense. They have to hide heavy industrial drilling and wiring in the middle of the Thar Desert, a wide-open, completely exposed environment where even the smallest disturbance in the sand is visible from space. To beat the surveillance, the engineering team calculates the exact orbital paths of the CIA satellites overhead. By memorizing these schedules, they figure out precisely when the cameras pass, allowing the crew to work furiously only during the brief windows of absolute darkness. Before the satellites complete their orbits and return, the Army Regiment acts as the ultimate cleanup crew. They rely on natural winds to erase tire tracks, bury thick sensor cables under the sand, and string up camouflage netting covered in artificial vegetation to hide the blast shafts. On the ground, everyone operates in disguise. The country's top nuclear physicists abandoned their civilian clothes for standard military uniforms. They even adopt fake operational codes, with Dr. Kalam walking the site under the alias Major General Prithviraj. By wrapping highly sensitive nuclear engineering inside a flawless, low-tech military camouflage operation, the Indian team effectively blinded a billion-dollar American surveillance network. On May 11, 1998, at 3:45 p.m., the desert winds suddenly die down. Seconds later, 3 simultaneous underground detonations violently fracture the Earth, sending shockwaves across the region. The blasts tear massive fissures into the sun-baked ground. 2 days later, on May 13th, the team conducts 2 additional experiments, cementing India's status as a full-fledged nuclear state. Washington wakes up to complete disbelief. The CIA realizes they missed the entire buildup. The intelligence community later characterizes the oversight as the greatest failure of the decade. Facing immense global fury, India launches a calculated diplomatic defense. They point out they never signed the NPT, so they broke no treaty. They bypassed the NSG embargoes by using entirely domestic materials, and they circumvented the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, or CTBT, by conducting the explosions strictly underground. Prime Minister Vajpayee and Dr. Kalam address the world press. They clarify that these devices are strictly a defensive deterrent, necessary for the security of a nation that historically has never invaded another country. By successfully developing these weapons using internal resources and outmaneuvering Western intelligence, India established its own military security without the assistance or permission of the established superpowers. They demonstrated that a developing nation could engineer its own defense while completely excluded from the global nuclear supply chain.